And I'd like to thank the organizing committee for inviting me to share remarks on this esteemed panel today, as well as the members and their staff of Congress who've joined us. As Rathik said, I'm Meetali and I'm with Reset.Tech. We are pursuing an agenda with many others of stopping big tech companies from profiting off of public harm by resetting the rules for online media. I previously was a legal and campaign director at Avaz, a global campaigning organization where I worked on global anti-disinformation efforts. And while there, I was part of a team that researched and published a report about incendiary hate speech and misinformation on Facebook in India, primarily targeted at Bengali Muslims in Assam in the run-up to the National Registration of Citizenship process back in 2019. We documented and flagged some of the most egregious kinds of hate that we saw on Facebook, which had been shared at that point almost 100,000 times. But Facebook's actions in response were slow and underwhelming. And of course, our research built on research that had been conducted by Equality Labs, and that was followed by the London Story, of whom Ritu is here today to talk about as well. And that report came just before the mass protests in India against a law that codified Islamophobia and which continued to persist until over 50 people, mostly Muslim, were killed months later in 2020. So the Facebook papers confirm what many of us have known for a long time and documented even in terms of the harms to Muslims, to lower caste peoples, to women, to refugees, but this time, as Rathik said, with actual documentation of what people inside the company have known. They confirm that the company over and over again has failed to curb Hindu nationalist hate speech and has inadequately assigned its resources to monitor a nation that has over 330 or 40 million users. And as Rathik said, the numbers are quite stark here, that although 90% of the user base for Facebook exists outside the US, only 13% of misinformation resources are allocated for this large section of the world. And so the interesting thing here is that while India represents the frontier of Facebook's growth, particularly as its user base wanes in the US and in Europe, also documented in the Facebook papers, India doesn't see a commensurate level of care and attention on the harms that are produced by the platform. It's merely a growth before safety type of approach that Facebook has taken, not only to India, but to many countries in the so-called global south. The Facebook papers also exposed a program called the Cross-Check program, which is a two-tier system where nearly 5.9 million Facebook users around the world, particularly politicians and high-profile celebrities, have been allowed to abuse the platform's terms and conditions with impunity. And these elite users are entirely exempt from enforcement decisions. Politicians and celebrities can speak and share content with impunity. And of course, this confirms what we've seen and known for years in India, and in which the Wall Street Journal revealed last year that then head of Facebook India, Anki Das, opposed applying hate speech rules to Hindu nationalists and BJP politicians. The papers also confirm that Facebook's automated classifiers for misinformation, these systems that are trained on machine learning to detect and take down posts that are harmful to society, have not been developed enough to recognize and take action on millions of posts, particularly those in languages other than English. And so while in India, in the Indian context, there have been classifiers built for Hindi and Bengali, the whole of India is actually much more complex and has a rich linguistic landscape, and Facebook's AI simply cannot keep up with the amounts of disinformation that spread on its platform. And all this while Facebook continues to tout its AI as having world-class ability to detect the worst hate speech and misinformation. So these inadequate investments and lack of attention to India, Facebook's largest market, have meant that the harms suffered have been of a broad range and have been very deep. Muslims, including Rohingya refugees, have been attacked both online, and this is often translated into offline violence of the most deadly kind. Facebook has also not been able to stop human trafficking of domestic workers, including domestic workers in India. And in fact, one report in recent weeks of reporting on the papers quoted an employee who spearheaded some of the research, the internal research in India, noting that, quote, "I've seen more images of dead people in the past 3 weeks than I've seen in my entire life total. The feed is a near constant barrage of polarizing nationalist content, misinformation, and violence and gore." But perhaps most damning is the documentation confirming Facebook's embrace of Modi and the right ruling party. Modi's campaign, as we know, made ample use of Facebook and other social networks, and there's plenty of evidence about the troll operations spearheaded by BJP cells that were not acted upon by Facebook. And according to the Wall Street Journals, investigators at Facebook zoned in on 2 BJP-linked Hindu nationalist organizations who they pinpointed as key drivers of mass Islamophobia, the RSS and the Bajrang Dal, and they recommended that the latter be banned, but it did not happen as the company was worried about the political implications. And so while this is what has been publicly reported, of course, the documents and the access to them is yet to be given to Indian journalists. When that happens, we expect that there will be a fresh round of reporting pertaining to the Indian context specifically. And it behooves us, I think, to come together and to really understand the implications of this and what we can do, particularly in the US, using our platform and privilege to push for meaningful regulation that takes into account these very serious harms at the global level. Thank you.